Time now for our political panel. We're joined by Deputy Director of the Australia Institute, Ebony Bennett, and Research Fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs, Kian Hussey. Ebony, it's been a very challenging week in federal politics. What do you make of how the Christian Porter rape allegation has been handled?
Look, it hasn't been handled very well. I think the politically smart thing, but more importantly, the right thing for the Prime Minister to do would have been to ask the Attorney General, Christian Porter, to stand aside when these allegations first came to his attention and to set up an independent inquiry at that time. As that's not happened, ourselves in the untenable situation I think that we do find ourselves in, where given that there's not going to be any further criminal investigation, I think it's untenable for this matter to simply say has been resolved by one conversation between the Prime Minister and the Attorney General, where he denied allegations that neither men had actually read at that time. That's untenable, and I think at this point the only reasonable option is an independent investigation. Many legal experts this week have said that such types of independent civil inquiries are usual in the corporate world and other sections of the community where these types of allegations emerge. And I think it was really wrong of the Attorney General to equate his matter in this situation as the personification of the rule of law, or to imply that the rule of law is at stake here. It's not. He was wrong to say that the owner reversed in his case as well. And I think really the only way to clear this situation to everyone's satisfaction, to give the Attorney General his right to deny these allegations and put his own case forward, is an independent investigation, and one should happen immediately.
Kian, how do you think it's been handled, and do you think there should be an inquiry?
Well, I think this idea about an independent investigation ignores the fact that New South Wales Police are independent. They are able to do an independent investigation. What I think has been very interesting, though, is the government talking about the rule of law. This is the same government that for the past few years has seemingly ignored the rule of law on multiple occasions. It was only 2 years ago that the Attorney General, that Christian Porter's own department, was pursuing conservative political activists for organising a political conference here in Australia. IPA research pointed out that the Foreign Interference Transparency Scheme Act blatantly ignored the rule of law, and then the Attorney General's own department used that act to investigate these people organising this conference. So I think that's been ironic. And another thing is, throughout the past 12 months, the Morrison government has stood idly by as states have trampled all over our democratic norms, the rule of law and due process, with lockdowns and arrests for people not wearing masks and even making posts on Facebook. So it's ironic that the government now is standing up for its own when it's ignored the rule of law in the past few years.
Okay, Ebony, the Aged Care Royal Commission handed down its final report this week. Do you think the government's response to the report was good enough?
Well, not so far. I believe the Treasurer has already, within a couple of days, overruled more than 2 years of work by more or less ruling out their recommendation that more revenue needs to be generated to fund the aged care system that all Australians deserve, with dignity at its heart. I think that was really disappointing to hear that. And, I think one of the key findings from the Royal Commission has been that much more funding is going to be required. That privatisation back in the Howard government era was a mistake. It put budget savings ahead of care. And now, after 30 years of uninterrupted economic growth, or almost that, Australia has an aged care system that's characterised by abuse and neglect. And the Royal Commissioners were united, although they differed on mechanism, with the idea that more revenue does need to be generated. And I think that's a conversation that we need to have now. The Morrison government passed about $300 billion worth of income tax cuts to the recession. We now find ourselves in very different economic circumstances, and a lot of those tax cuts a lot of tax concessions are very generous to older and wealthier Australians. And I think now is the time for Australia to be having a good discussion about generating more revenue, about where our tax concessions are going, and how we are going to fund the types of services that Australians deserve. And the Royal Commission says, much more funding is going to be required to fund certainly an aged care system with dignity at its heart. So I think that's a big question for the government, and probably one that won't go away. But it was really disappointing, I think, to hear the Treasurer rule out some kind of new Medicare levy or something along those lines, and just say that we're going to get this funding from economic growth. I think it's time to re-examine the Stage 3 income tax cuts. They were worth about $130. They won't come in until 2024-25. Do they need to come in at all? I think there's a lot of live questions here for the Treasurer, and it's about time Australia had a big conversation about revenue.
Cian, what's your view on the government's initial response to the Aged Care Royal Commission, and as to what Ebony said they ruled out a levy?
Well, we saw the government immediately commit an additional $450 million towards aged care, and there will be more to come in the budget, I'm sure. I think Ebony is exactly right that we need an aged care system with dignity at its heart. All Australians deserve to live in dignity, and some of the stories that came out of this Royal Commission are heartbreaking, really. But I think we also need to, and I of course think we should have a conversation about the policies and how we're going to fund this. But I think we can also, this is a question of the government spending priorities. Royal Commission found that it wasn't just the for-profit aged care facilities where there was an issue. It was not-for-profit ones too. It seems to be a very system-wide issue. And in terms of additional revenue, I don't think this is the time to be raising taxes in the wake of a recession. It's interesting, some independent modelling that was presented to the Royal Commission found that the government would need to spend in the order of around $10 billion, perhaps up to $15 billion more per year to have a better system. We're spending about $18 billion this year servicing the government debt. And IPA research has shown that by 2030, that could blow up to $64 billion per year. This is just interest, just the interest on the debt. So I think it calls into question those other things that the government is spending money on. They've been happy to spend billions of dollars a year funding universities and funding research at universities that peddles identity, and of course the $1 billion a year that the ABC receives. So I think there are alternatives. We don't just need to increase revenue. We can reallocate other spending. And I think that increasing taxes in the wake of the recession and the largest employment crisis in recent history would just be absolute folly.
Okay. Well, moving on to something different that's making headlines around the world. Meghan Markle has opened up in a tell-all interview with Oprah Winfrey. Ebony, the full interview hasn't even aired yet, and it's certainly causing a stir. What do you make of Meghan Markle's decision to speak out?
Certainly an understandable one. It sounds like both Harry and Meghan had a lot of problems while they were still, active members of the royal family. And I think a lot of the controversy really comes out of the fact that for people not involved in the monarchy, and perhaps a lot of people outside Britain and certainly within it, it seems the timing of against Meghan Markle, this investigation into allegations of bullying within her staff, seemed calculated to cruel the pitch for this Oprah Winfrey interview. And many people are asking why there's an investigation into Meghan Markle's behaviour when there has been no similar one into allegations levelled against Prince Andrew that he slept with an underage girl as part of the women who were sex trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. I think that's a huge and hypocritical double standard that people can see at operation within the royal family, or the firm as it's known. But I'm sure there's many people all around the world who'll be dying to watch this Oprah interview. I will be one of them, and I'll be really keen to see how these two are doing, and I hope that they're doing really well, and excited for their new baby on the way as well.
It's certainly causing controversy. Cian, will you be watching the interview?
I don't think I will be, to be honest. I think that of course, Harry and Meghan have as much a right as anyone to sit down with whomever they like and speak about their lives. But I think that for many people around the world, this has been an incredibly tough year. It seems a bit tone deaf with the rest of the whole of the UK. Most of it is still under lockdown. Hundreds of thousands of people out of work. We know around the world there's over 200 million school children who haven't been in a classroom in almost 12 months. We've had hundreds of thousands of businesses close. I think we have some really serious issues around the world that we need to deal with in the wake of coronavirus. And I think I'll probably spend my time thinking about something else rather than watching this interview.
Fair enough. We have to leave it there. Ebony Bennett and Kean Hussey, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.